exclusive. There are a host of international biggies that have lined up for a stake in BPCL. Remember, the deadline for bids for a 51% stake had been extended to the end of this month due to the COVID concerns. But my colleague Ajay Sharma reports that there need not be so much fear or worry on the horizon, because global biggies like Saudi Aramco, Russia's Rosneft, Exxon Mobil, ADNOC among others are all lined up for the bids. What does this mean for the entire divestment process, and why is it so crucial to keep the foot on the pedal right now is what we're going to look at. But first, let's go across to Ajay for more details on the story. Ajay, fantastic break from you today. We saw the impact on the stock as well. Can you take us through the details of what we're hearing?
Well, that's correct. Our sources are telling us that the big divestment program is moving forward. And exclusive detail which we have gathered is that global oil majors starting from Saudi Aramco, Abu Dhabi's ADNOC, Exxon Mobil, even Russia's Rosneft has shown interest and are likely to bid for or participate in the bidding for strategic stake in BPCL. Now, we all know that BPCL is one of the prized assets in the refining space in India, close to 16,500 outlets, fuel retail outlets, and refineries, 3 refineries across the country, making it one of the prized, as far as market share is concerned, they have 25% market share in India's petroleum retailing and 1% of global market share. So it's a great asset for companies which are already in upstream to go downstream in growth markets like India. We understand that valuations for this are likely to be around the 1.2 lakh crore mark. Remember, right now the valuations are hovering at about 80,000 crore mark, so a slight premium to what it is trading at. But you also have to adjust for Numaligarh refinery will not be a part of this transaction. Government will retain it. That's close to 10,000 crore, close to 8,000 crore is the treasury stock. There is some portfolio, investment portfolio as well, but still it's a great asset at a fair valuation. We understand from our sources that the advisors which are working on the valuation say that this is a reasonable valuation around which global majors are interested in going forward. So there are two things. One, it is likely to be what also we understand, though these 4-5 big companies are likely to bid for it, but in all likelihood the transaction may tilt in a government to government kind of a transaction. That's the high probability. It may actually happen with Rosneft, it may actually happen with ADNOC or even Saudi Aramco, though there were 2 Indian companies as well. Reliance Industry, which has just formed a JV with BP, we understand is also participating, and India's Vedanta, which is also in oil business via Ken, had earlier been very vocal about looking at BPCL closely, but now we understand will not be participating in it because they are busy right now in their own delisting, etc., and they are not finding the valuation very attractive. We reached out to most of the parties, and Reliance of course did not want to comment on our query. Vedanta too said they don't want to comment on market speculation. BPCL says that they are not aware of it, but we understand that this is happening for sure. 31st July is the last date which the government has extended, and the response has started to pour in. Those are the exclusive details which we are gathering on BPCL strategic divestment.
All right, thanks for that, Ajay. Great big breaking story over there. Now, the questions to ponder are, does this kickstart an entire drive towards divestment? I mean, ET Now reported a few days ago once more that a mega post-COVID privatization plan is being put together by DIPAM, and the government is very keen to push this along. But what would be the contours of it, and why is it important to make sure that this goes through? To speak more on this, I'm joined now by Mythili Bhusnurmath, consulting editor, ET Now. Mythili, great to speak to you again. Is this the now or never sort of moment for the entire privatization divestment plan? It's been a bugbear with India. We've been having this conversation for decades that privatization needs to take place. Has this confluence of factors, the pandemic, the big yawning fiscal deficit gap, will it create the right environment and the right impetus?
Well, the government certainly needs funds, but that should frankly not be the only reason to drive privatization. The idea is to have government get out of businesses where it shouldn't be in the first place, and to ensure that these same businesses have better values going forward. But certainly now the immediate desire for funds by the government to finance its expenses will give the key push that is required for privatization. Because unfortunately, over the years, in fact, last year we saw the government fall grossly short of its disinvestment target. And this year it has a very ambitious 2.1 lakh crore target. So I think if this BPCL disinvestment were to go through, we have time, and as Ajay says, by 31st July, we do expect to see serious bids, then hopefully this will kickstart the process and give an impetus, because there's nothing like the search for funds, and that is crucial at this juncture. So I think this will provide the necessary, impetus to the disinvestment drive, which is necessary for other reasons as well.
What are the sort of hiccups and challenges that we have to look at, Mythili, especially with a company like BPCL, an extremely attractive asset, as Ajay also spoke about, and the question of the ability to direct prices. Now, fuel prices, retail fuel prices is a very sensitive issue. You and I have spoken about this earlier, and technically they're supposed to be completely independent of any government interference. In practice, that does not always happen. Would that be, one key consideration for any bidder looking at this?
No, since the government has taken the decision to disinvestment its stake about 53% in BPCL, I do not think that should be a factor, because the government interference will not be there. At the same time, as I said, this is an attractive asset. And if you look at a private company like Reliance, which has been able to raise more than 2 lakh crores funds in a fairly short period of time, it should not be difficult for a prize asset, a blue chip company like BPCL, to get attractive bids. So I think it's purely a case of government sending the right signals. And as we've seen, the expression of interest, the process is transparent. And unlike other divestments where government continues to hold the reins, as it were, this is a disinvestment where the government is going to step out. And that will give a great deal of confidence to the private bidder. Unlike in the case of Air India, which, if you remember, was a failed attempt at disinvestment, and repeated extensions of the deadline have not really brought any serious bidders. I think once the government has taken a decision and is prepared to disinvest its entire stake and the controlling stake, you will find private investors coming in. And let's not forget, Tamanna, that there is enough liquidity sloshing around in global markets. And as we have seen, it's not just Reliance, there are other companies also which are tapping the market to make use of this kind of money that is sloshing around in the global market. So it should not be difficult, provided the government is really serious about it.
Absolutely. In fact, if the Geo platform, stake sales are anything to go by, there's definitely an appetite out there for strategic investments. Let's just take a look at what else is in the pipeline, Mythili. Concore, we could perhaps expect EOIs in the next 4 to 6 weeks. We're hearing that the Tatas may be the only ones left for Air India. Then there is a whole plan to list LIC as well, which seem to be the most promising at this point post BPCL.
Well, certainly Concore is a very good, attractive company. In the case of LIC, there's always a fear that their government interference will remain, particularly because it is a behemoth in the insurance space, and given the kind of responsibilities, etc., that we are imposing on LIC every time to ride as a white knight, when, like in the case of IDBI, we asked LIC to pick up a stake. So I think in the case of LIC, you may not find that many bidders, because there would always be the wariness about government interference. But Concore certainly is an attractive investment, and particularly because the government has also shown its willingness to allow private entry into the railway space, I think we would find some interest. But I think the problem really is, Tamanna, there's been some kind of flip-flop on government's part also in the area of disinvestment, because earlier there was talk that the government is going to not push through on Concord and Shipping Corporation because the capital markets don't look very good, they're volatile. But volatility is a part of capital markets. So I think you should not go on dithering. Take courage in your hands and go out. Particularly now, as I said, we desperately need the funds. The only question is whether we should use these funds wisely. We already have an NIIF, Infrastructure Investment Fund. So ideally, these funds should go there. They should be used for creating infrastructure, which will always also create jobs and demand. So I think how we use the money is as important as the entire process of disinvestment.
What about the disinvestment target of 2.1 lakh crore rupees? Mythili, you spoke earlier about how we didn't manage to hit those targets last year, even more ambitious ones this year, in the middle of a global pandemic. Do you think that if the focus is maintained, it is achievable?
And there's no reason why it should not be achieved. Because as I said, we do have the case of a large private company which has managed to raise something comparable to what the government's disinvestment target is. So, and the government does have, as I said, low-hanging fruit like Suti, which for some reason the government has not been willing to sell entirely. So there are some low-hanging fruit, and provided the government really puts its nose to the book, as it were, and pushes it, there's no reason why it shouldn't be able to. Particularly, as I said, there is so much of global liquidity sloshing around. There isn't much scope for companies to invest. So they are looking for attractive investments. So I think provided the government is serious about it and does not dither and pushes ahead, it should be able to realize that target. Of course, it's a tall ask, but generally speaking, the NDA government has been more successful in disinvestment than the UPA government. Of course, last year we did not achieve our target, but in the previous 2 years, we did achieve our target. So nothing is impossible. Where there is a will, there is a way.
All right, let's see if the way shows itself in this case. Big news coming in on BPCL, so there might be some positivity there. We'll have to see how it all pans out by the 31st July, which is the deadline for submission. Thank you so much, Mythili, for joining us. We'll take a very short break at this point. When we come back, it's been exactly 1 month since the clash between Indian and Chinese forces at Galwan Valley on the line of actual control. A month later, negotiations for de-escalation are still on, but meanwhile, China has turned aggressor in many other parts of the world and is also increasingly being called out. Helping us break down the China conundrum will be Gautam Bambawale, former Indian ambassador to China. Do stay tuned for that very exclusive conversation coming right up.